We'll start as soon as the camera comes on in the back. You see a little red light back there, then we'll be on cable channel 6, must-see TV. No, she's here. Yeah, she's hiding back there. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right, everyone ready?
Lights are on.
How did you know that?
I'd like to call the Monday, June 4, 2018 Oakwood City Council meeting to order. Would you please rise and join me with the pledge to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a roll call, please, Lori?
Mayor Duncan?
Here.
Vice Mayor Byington?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mrs. Hilton? Here. Mr. Epley?
Here.
And may I have a report on the minutes of our May 7 regular session and work session, Mrs. Hilton?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I have reviewed the minutes, and I find them to be correct and complete, and therefore I move that they be adopted as written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, so ordered. This is a fun time here in Oakwood for me as mayor to get to swear in with the oath of office for two public safety officers. We will do them one at a time. The first person that I'd like to swear in is Justin Sloan. I believe Justin's here with his wife Rebecca and their son Owen. So I'm going to come down to the front here, and Chief Hill's going to join me, and we'll do the oath of office. And then I think the chief has some comments that he'd like to make about Justin, correct? All right. All right. Congratulations. How are you? Good. All right, Justin, if you would repeat after me, if you want to raise your right hand. I solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Ohio, and I will obey the laws thereof, and that I will, in all respects, uphold and enforce the provisions of the Charter and ordinances of this city, and will faithfully discharge the duties of public safety officer upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
Just briefly before I say something about Justin here, this is another exciting night for us in the safety department as we officially welcome our two newest members. Not too long ago, I was in a leadership conference and there was an HR, human resources component in the middle of it where they talked about recruiting, attracting, and hiring and acquiring top-notch personnel. Because at the end of the day, we can do our best job to recruit and attract, but your candidate pool is only who applies. And essentially, as the instructor kind of went on a tangent, he said, ultimately, you're stuck with who applies because that's your pick of the lot from which you can hire. And for here in Oakwood, we've been extremely fortunate for over a decade now. Starting back in 2006 with Officer Evans, who's with us tonight, we will now replace, after swearing in these two individuals, 19 of our 22 public safety officers. So we've had almost a 90% turnover in 11 years, And we've talked about it repeatedly over the last decade about the quality of personnel and talent that we continue to attract and bring to our city. I think it says a lot about our department, the city we work in, and the residents we serve, and I think that's worth mentioning. So with that being said, I want to officially welcome Justin. Justin is a graduate of Tecumseh High School. While in high school, he completed his Level 1 fire certification and EMT certification, so I think he knew early on in life what his career path was. Shortly after high school, he began his career in the fire service with Bethel Township Fire Department. While at Bethel, he completed his Level 2 fire certification and his paramedic certification, and he ultimately ended up getting promoted to the rank of lieutenant. After being fully certified as a career firefighter paramedic, he moved on to a career department. He briefly worked for the city of Monroe before in 2010 he got hired on by the city Fairborn Fire Department. While at Fairborn, Justin was actively involved in their EMS program. He served as a standing orders trainer. He participated in their quality assurance and improvement program. And additionally, Justin is a state certified fire investigator and will serve the city of Oakwood in this capacity. He will now be one of 2 fire investigators that we have on staff here. Additionally, Justin is a state certified EMS instructor, and he actively teaches various continuing education courses at the paramedic level. Most recently, last Wednesday, Justin came on board in January, but last Wednesday he graduated the police academy. He's scheduled to take his police academy test on June 19th. He will immediately begin his field training program. I think it's worth noting, Justin graduated the academy with top honors. He graduated #1 overall in academics, #1 overall in Top Shot, which is the best shot competition, and #1 overall in physical fitness from the Sinclair Community College. It's worth noting because I believe that you were the 110th Academy. 110th Academy, they estimate about 2,000 graduates, and to graduate at the top 3 has only happened 3 times throughout the history of Sinclair since they've been issuing these awards. Ironically, all 3 have been Oakwood employees. So Justin joins a very elite class with Sarah Whitaker and Cameron McElroy, and you should be proud of yourself for that accomplishment because by the numbers, it doesn't happen every day. So congratulations and welcome aboard.
And our next public safety officer that I'm looking forward to giving the oath of office to is Jesse Schaffer, correct? And Jesse's here with his mother, Sherry, and his girlfriend, Renee DePoy, and child, Avery. If you'd all like to join us, you're welcome to do that. So if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Ohio, and that I will obey the laws thereof, and that I will, in all respects, uphold and enforce the provisions of the Charter and ordinances of this city, and will faithfully discharge the duties of public safety officer upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
Jesse is a graduate of the Spring Valley Academy and grew up in the Centerville area. Following graduation, or high school graduation, Jesse enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, where he served as an MP for 6 years with the reserve unit out at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. His 6 years just ended in May, 2 weekends ago. So we thank you for your service for the last 6 years to our country. Jesse is another PSO that has come on board who is fully certified in all 3 disciplines. Much like Justin here, he knew exactly what career path he wanted to choose. Jesse completed his fire and EMS training at Sinclair Community College, and he immediately began working part-time as a firefighter EMT with the Washington Township Fire Department for 2 years. Subsequently, he got hired on at the Kettering Fire Department as well, and he served as a part-time firefighter EMT for 2 additional years with Kettering. Somewhere along the line, the Ohio State Highway Patrol had an opening, and in 2016, he left the fire service and he became a full-time trooper with the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Although Justin and Jesse are being sworn in tonight together, they actually got hired from 2 different hiring processes. Justin started last May, and Jesse's just started here earlier, late winter, early spring. And and shortly after we announced a promotion or the opportunity and solicited applications, one of our lieutenants received a call from a command staff member from a neighboring fire department that knew about Jesse. And he said, unsolicited phone call, we heard Jesse Schaffer applied. Yeah, you guys need to hire him. Because I wish we would have before he went on to Ohio State Highway Patrol. And he said, I don't know who else is in your process, but he said, I guarantee you this, he's going to finish number 1 or he's going to finish number 2. Jesse is the first person off that eligibility list to get sworn in tonight. So he was right. I think that speaks to the character and the man that stands next to me. So with that, welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you here.
It's always enjoyable having all the peer group here come to support the fellow officers. So thank you all for coming too. We've said on many occasions, and thank you for coming. It is somewhat troubling that we're hiring people whose parents are younger than me. But that said, we appreciate all the efforts of our public safety department. It's clearly the best in the area, and one of the reasons why it's a great place to live in Oakwood. Next, we had 2 vacancies in one of our citizen committees, the Environmental Committee, and we have reached out to Heidi Susta and Ted Kircher, both of whom have agreed to serve on the Environmental Committee. And so I would accept a motion, or I'll make a motion that we appoint these 2 folks, and would ask for a second.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So ordered. So we will be in contact with those folks, and we look forward to working with them on our Environmental Committee. I think Carol's going to contact them. We have a special visitor here tonight. We have Montgomery County Treasurer Carolyn Rice. Welcome. They didn't all leave because you were coming. So, okay. But I think you have a report for us, and we welcome you, Carolyn.
Thank you. It's been a few years
Yes,
since
it
I've
has.
been here. It takes me a few to get around. So thank you for allowing me to come. And good news, no problems. I'm here just to provide you with an update of what's happening in my office and a snapshot of your delinquency at this moment. And I think there'd be a lot of communities that would like this snapshot. So that's the great news. I always, wherever I go, I have to say, if you know of any property owners who owe us money, they should contact our office, 225-4010, and come in, because that's absolutely the best thing they can do. When they don't do it, that's when they get in trouble, because they get interest and penalties. So that's my first message. Don't be afraid of us. We are here to help you succeed and get things back on track. All right, so Oakwood is comprised, according to our records, of 4,068 parcels. And only 35 parcels are delinquent. Wow. With a total value, meaning this is what's owed, $214,177.80 as of this moment. Now, you know we're printing bills for second half, but that's at this very moment. 11 parcels are on a payment plan, which means about 31%. And even that, while none of us are satisfied, I'm certainly not satisfied. That is better than a lot of communities. So we still have an issue that we need to get the other 24 either paid or on a payment plan, because if you're on a payment plan, you're considered, as long as you're making those payments, you're considered in good standing with us, and you don't get any more penalties and interest. So it's in your interest as well as our interest for that to happen. 99% of your delinquency is residential properties, which is always good. The others can be even more difficult to collect. And so, like I said, although the number is small, we still want every one of those addressed. So if you can help get the word out, I would appreciate it. Just to give you an idea, our delinquent payment plans, what happens is they don't get 2 big bills a year. They come in, they get on a contract, they put some money down, they tell us, what their situation is, and they'll get a monthly payment plan, just like you do a car payment, insurance, or whatnot. And part of that will go towards the upcoming bill, and part will go towards the taxes that they already owe. When they graduate and have fulfilled that obligation, we like to keep them on a prepayment plan so they never get big bills again, so that hopefully they never get behind again. So and I've already stated it, but you're in good standing when you're on a payment plan. And as long as you make that obligation, you are not going to get more penalties and interest. Now, if you don't, what happens? You didn't avoid it. When you go off and get voided, all that you escaped come on. So there's good reason to stay on the plan. Just to let you know, we currently have about 4,832 active payment plans for the entire county. I'm not satisfied with that because we probably have at least 20,000 people who are delinquent. Now, that can be anything from a small amount to a very large amount, but that means that 75% of the people are getting more interest, more penalties, and they're their own worst enemy by not stepping forward. So that's the situation we face. So we have to have a few hammers, right? You have to have some enforcement. I don't have a lot of tools, but the 2 that I have, the first one is a tax lien, and I'm sure I talked about it the last time. And I know that you all saw, this was when we published it recently. I know everybody looks at it and sees if they know anybody, because I get complaints of how small the printing is. Of like, how do you expect me to look up my neighbors? It's so small. So I know people read it. And if it shames people into doing the right thing, so be it. But we keep it small because it's mighty expensive to do this. But we are required to publicly publish that so that you are given full rights that this is coming. Now, the other thing I would say to anybody in the room is do not feel sorry for anybody on this list, okay? Do I have everybody's agreement? You do not get on this list right away. You've had quite a few opportunities. We've counted up, we often will reach out about 9 different times in a year. So if you owe us $10, you are not on this list. You owe us more, and we're running out of ways to reach you. So this is my second to last resort. We sell these liens twice a year, and actually we're having a tax lien sale this very week. So we started out with this many, but there'll be a very small number that actually get sold, but you don't know which ones it'll be, and you don't want it to be yours because you will no longer owe our office. You will owe the tax lien buyer, and then you'll owe them like credit card interest every month. Okay, so there is a penalty, but it's one last chance to avoid foreclosure. We are also instituting prosecutor letters every month. And so we are sending 20 to 30 letters to people, the prosecutor is, and we mean business. And that means if you do not come in and either get on a payment plan or you pay this off, you will get foreclosure filings. That you don't have that happen quickly either. So that's all happening. We have to do enforcement because all of the people who pay on time sure want us to pay attention to the people who don't, because if we deliver the monies that you're expecting from your levies, then you don't have to make tough choices. So, and in your case, you're doing really well, so it's not a big issue, but there are other communities where it is a major issue. The other thing I wanted to talk just really quickly about is the Montgomery County Land Bank, something I'm quite proud of. I founded it, I'm the chair of it, and we have done incredible work. I do not think we've done much, if any, work in Oakwood. I think you have the resources to handle any blight that, at least thus far, but someday maybe we'll be able to come to help you as well. But we have brought in through, we've gotten federal monies and brought in more than $25 million to demolish more than 2,000 homes that were real eyesores. We also work on projects that repurpose commercial properties. We do planning grants for certain communities. We have a revolving fund that some communities have taken advantage of in order to do remodeling projects with things that they want to have very tight control on. So we do a number of things. We're doing very cool things. I will tell everyone that the majority way that the land bank is paid for is for every dollar of delinquent taxes and assessments that my office collects, 5 cents goes to the land bank. That turns out to be, depending on the year, $1.5 to $2 million. And so if you pay your taxes on time, you have never contributed a penny to the land bank. The people who are delinquent in their taxes, a very small portion of that money is going to fund the land bank in order to do the work that we need to do. So very proud of that accomplishment, and we're continuing. I will also tell you that we as a board have just made a decision in recent months to do a pilot program. As we continue to evolve, we were first formed in 2011, so we've been around for 7 years now. And we are, these monies coming from the federal government are going to be done in 2020. So we are thinking of ways we can be most strategic in our limited funding that we have. And what we're doing, and we've made a decision, our first pilot project is to focus a lot of effort on a single neighborhood. And our first project is the Pineview neighborhood, just across from the VA on Gettysburg. And I think it used to be called the Lakeside Pavilion, if you remember. You're as old as I am, you might remember that, that neighborhood. We are, and we're not alone, this is a collaboration of many different agencies. We are, like I said, investing up to $250,000 in that neighborhood. And we are going to be acquiring and demolishing 10 properties, acquiring and remodeling 5 properties, and then doing other things within to try to bolster that along with other partner agencies to really help lift up that neighborhood. Our goal is to be able to do 2 neighborhoods a year in the future, but we've got to work it all out. We think if we all collaborate, we'll be able to do so much more than any one of us just doing here and there, and it doesn't really add up. So we're kind of excited to see how this all works out. We've played a role in, we're playing a role in the arcade, the Levitt Pavilion, so we are not big players in that, but if not for us, some of those might have been more challenging. So we play a very significant role in some of the big projects that the community has happened. So it has been awesome. And that's all I have for this evening. Do you have any questions?
That's it. Does anyone have questions for
Yeah, I
the
do.
treasurer?
Sure.
Talking kind of in the idea of trends, you said Oakwood only has 35 delinquent. Do you have any idea what Oakwood had maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And I won't hold you to exact numbers, but.
I do not know. I would have to look and see the last time I was here.
Okay.
If I have that in my document file, I can look that up. I'm telling you, this is really good. So.
Well, is it same with you said 20,000 in the county? Is that number up or down, from last year? How about that?
It stays pretty consistent.
Is it pretty consistent?
It stays pretty consistent. So for every one we get off, another one comes on.
Okay.
But what I can tell you to address your point, a lot of people are surprised of the current taxes owed every year. Throughout, this is my 12th year in office, throughout each year, we have consistently collected between 94 to 95% of the current taxes owed countywide. So even though we have this huge delinquency problem, primarily in the urban center and the ring, but it's everywhere. There's no place that really escapes it. We have been very effective at doing that. It truly is the delinquent taxes and assessments and interest that gets piled on. Our research showed that after about 3 years, because the first time it's 10%, and then the second time that year it's 10%, and then there's interest in August, and then there's interest in December. Next year we start all over. At 3 years, in many cases, what you end up owing is so terrific that it's rational to say, this property isn't worth this anymore. I owe so much. Not every property, and we never give up. That's not what I'm saying. But we have a sense of urgency to get on them quickly because they can get out of control. And we have had much greater success with our new payment plans that we changed about 6 years ago because it's more like having a part of your budget, and you kind of never get rid of us, that we are, after you've paid off the delinquency, you feel like you just got a break because now you're only paying your current taxes owed. So I feel good about where we are. I feel like I'm never satisfied, but it isn't as horrible as people imagine.
Right, so 95% is about the
94 to 95% is what so you can see that yours is, 99 point whatever.
Well, yeah, but in the county, it's around 95% you collect.
Uh-huh.
Can you give me a comparison about Hamilton County, Franklin County, Cuyahoga County? Where are they?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just curious as to, I've never heard these numbers before. I'm just curious as to, are we above, are we below? I mean, I would think I think 95 is excellent, personally. But I just don't know, so.
It's good. I'd be more satisfied if it was all up like yours.
Well, yeah.
And some, we have really big ones. So, some of these have been delinquent for 30 years and they don't qualify for any of our projects, and that number just keeps growing. So we're kind of caught up in the mathematics thing too. And I have no way of, when I was in business, you could decide bad debt, we're never going to collect this, but I can't do that. So it just has to keep compiling. Right. So that's where the land bank and different things come in, but even we don't have unlimited resources, so it has to be some strategic project that we would commit resources to for the good of the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any
others?
Any others?
Yes, I wonder if you could do a sentence or two about your role in the arcade project?
Well, it is, first of all, for many years, every time it would come around, Channel 7 would come see me, and what about that arcade? So it's been a pet project of mine for 12 years. And when Mayor Whaley came in, she formed the task force. So really, what we're going to do at this stage is that it will go into our hands. I actually have to sign something tomorrow. And don't ask me to explain it. It's a very complicated project, but by our acquisition, it helps serve a purpose to move that project forward for some limited period of time, not for forever or anything like that. But beyond that, I cannot tell you because it's very complicated. It's a legal thing, but it's within the spirit of what we are here to do to make projects like that happen. So there's a reason we get involved, because it's complicated and problems, and so we help to get it moving on to its next life.
When you say we, is that
The
county?
land bank?
Oh, the land bank, okay.
Yes.
Not county.
I'm the
land
chair
bank.
of the land bank.
The land bank specifically, all right. thank
Yeah,
you.
we're our own public nonprofit.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
All right,
Yep, thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, anything else? Well, thank you very much for coming to Oakwood.
Thank
We
you.
welcome you. and
I
we-
drive by here, so many times, and it's good to come over and visit with you all.
Well, hopefully you've never had to pay a ticket.
I have not.
Good for you. Okay, well, we appreciate you coming, Carolyn, and good luck to you. Welcome. Okay. Do we have any other visitors who wish to address council at this time? If so, this would be your time to come down to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and we would welcome you. All right. Can't do it? All right. Then we will then close the visitors section of our meeting, and we will go to legislation, and Vice Mayor Byington has an ordinance.
Yes, Your Honor, this is an ordinance to amend Section 1 of 2018's original appropriation ordinance number 4850 to provide for the appropriation of an additional amount of $20,000 to be expended from the Law Enforcement Fund for the purpose of purchasing a vehicle for the use by the city detective. This is a supplemental appropriation ordinance to authorize the expenditure of forfeited funds, and it was introduced for a first reading at our May council meeting. Between 2015 and 2016, Oakwood Detective Steve Norris led a multi-jurisdictional investigation into possible drug crimes in the area. That investigation resulted in the arrest of 2 individuals and the seizure of over 160 pounds of marijuana, numerous vehicles and firearms, and over $300,000 in U.S. currency. Federal law provides for the forfeiture of money related to illegal drug activity, and upon forfeiture, the money is distributed among the law enforcement agencies involved in that case. In this case, the forfeited money was distributed among 9 agencies, and Oakwood's share is $27,480.66. The Director of Public Safety has recommended that a portion of this money should be used to replace the city's detective vehicle, which is nearing the end of its useful service life and is frequently in need of repair. The entire cost of the replacement vehicle will be paid from the forfeiture funds. However, a supplemental appropriation is necessary because that vehicle was not originally budgeted for replacement in 2018. The Safety Department, and especially Detective Norris, were instrumental in this investigation, and Council believes that this is an appropriate use for the money. This supplemental appropriation will provide for an additional $20,000 from our law enforcement fund. Under Section 3.04 of the City Charter, this ordinance will take effect upon its passage. And as this is the second reading of this ordinance, I move that Council adopt it this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion or questions for Vice Mayor Byington? Hearing none, Lori, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Duncan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Byington?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mrs. Hilton?
Yes.
Mr. Epley?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Byington also has an ordinance regarding a proposed change to our zoning code.
Yes, Your Honor. This is an ordinance to amend existing Section 301, which is terms defined of the Oakwood zoning ordinance, to clarify certain definitions pertaining to residential uses and to adopt new Section 409 residential group rentals of the Oakwood zoning ordinance. This ordinance is to update our zoning code. The Planning Commission has already reviewed it and held a public hearing on May 2nd, 2018, and has unanimously recommended that Council approve it. This is a first reading of this ordinance, so I'm not going to be making a motion this evening, but since this is a text amendment of the zoning code, Council is required to hold a public hearing. At this time, Mayor Duncan, I would ask that you convene that public hearing.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Byington. If anyone, I think our law director wants to start the public hearing with a report on your work, so I will have you come down to the dais and address council. And welcome to you as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mayor Duncan, members of council, City Manager Klotz. What you have in front of you tonight, I trust all of you have looked through it and read it in its entirety. This is an ordinance that will make a few different changes to our zoning code. Some of them are in the definitional section, which is 301 of the zoning code, and then the other changes to add a new section 409 that specifically deals with what we're calling residential group rentals. When you think about zoning, what we're doing is regulating land use, and in a community like Oakwood, where it's primarily or predominantly residential in character, regulating land use means regulating people's homes and how they live. And so this is an area where we have to tread kind of carefully, but it's also a very important and critical part of what we do here. And there's always a potential for either litigation or changes at the federal level that can impact our zoning ordinances. The most recent time that we've amended these definitions, by the way, would be in 2012, when we made some changes to the definition of family to incorporate federal fair housing laws and to make some exemptions for things like group homes for people with either mental retardation or developmental disabilities. So when there are changes at the federal level, sometimes we have to make changes in our zoning code. When there are concerns constitutional concerns that have to do with land use. Sometimes that'll trickle down, and we have to change our zoning code as well. And so we've been looking at this for a long time. Our zoning code has a definition in there of what constitutes a family, and that's important in a zoning code. You have to have, we talk about what are permitted land uses in different zoning districts, and it's all discussed in terms of family. There are single-family property uses, there are two-family property uses, what we would call a duplex, and then there are multifamily, which would be apartment buildings greater than two. But we say it's single-family or it's two-family, multifamily. What is a family? And we've always had a definition in our code. The trick has been in trying to word that in a way that it's both, that it's got some teeth to it and that it's enforceable, and that it also preserves the character of the neighborhoods the way that we all want them preserved. So I started looking at this part of our zoning code earlier this year. My review was prompted by a case that I was reading from another jurisdiction where a city was being challenged on how they defined family. And so that got me taking a look at ours to see if could any of those constitutional concerns be concerns with ours as well. And I actually enlisted the help of an outside attorney, Steve Byron, who focuses on these kinds of issues day in and day out. And we kind of went through how we address this issue in our zoning code. As a result of that, he made several specific recommendations that are incorporated in the ordinance that you see in front of you tonight. One of those is, he said, you have some definitions in the code that from a court's perspective could be perceived as being vague. Now, it's important for me to point this out. We've not been challenged on this. There's no specific or current problem that we're trying to address in proposing these changes. But the constitutional vagueness doctrine is something that comes up a lot in these kinds of cases. And so that's what he was zeroing in on. And his attention was drawn to several definitions that have to do with homes. Dwelling, attached dwelling, detached dwelling, efficiency unit, and some of the other ones that you see spelled out there in the ordinance in front of you. Almost universally, the problem with some of those was a particular phrase that was being used in there. And there were some variations on that, but basically we said that a dwelling is a principal building or portion thereof that's designed or used exclusively for residential occupancy. Well, what does it mean for something to be designed or used for residential occupancy? I have an idea in my head. You may have an idea in your head. You may have an idea in your head, but our ideas may not match up. And so what I've tried to do with these definitions is to actually explain that a little further, clarify that further, so that when we're talking about what does it mean to be designed or used in a particular way, we can go to the code and we can look and see it spelled out very clearly. And so, for example, on that one, now we've added text. For purposes of this definition, a principal building or portion thereof is designed or used exclusively for residential occupancy if it is located in a residential zoning district and consists of one or more dwelling units. Now, it may seem kind of elementary, but it's important that the code spell that out, because if you're going to enforce it, it's important that those people who are being regulated by this can read it and understand the conduct that they can and can't engage in, and the uses that they can and can't put their property to. They need to know clearly it's a due process concern, first and foremost. So variations of that appeared in several of those definitions, whether something was designed or used exclusively for this. I think elsewhere we had arranged, designed, or used as living quarters for one family only. All those definitions have been clarified to try to avoid any argument that they might be vague at some point in the future. The other thing that he recommended was he talked about, there's a case in Toledo challenging a zoning ordinance up there, and the court was very concerned with definitions of family that do what the court calls slicing into the very heart of what constitutes the family. And what the court meant by that is they're talking about ordinances that get into spelling out very concretely who is and who isn't considered your relative or your family member. And if you think about the times that we're in, which are changing, a decade ago, gay marriage was not on the map. Now it's the law of the land, and it's fairly commonplace. There have also been, not just homosexuality, heterosexuality, there have been other changes in people's living arrangements. It's much more common for people to live together today without being married, for example. And so the very idea of what is a family is evolving a little bit, and we want our definition to kind of keep up with that. What the Toledo court was concerned about is you don't want your definition being too specific. I believe in Toledo, they said the family can be people who are, husband, wife, brother, sister, parent, child, etc., but they excluded more remote blood relationships as being part of a family. What the Toledo court said, though, is people need to be able to decide for themselves who constitutes their family. And so what we've done to deal with that is, well, before I say that, let me back up. Prior to this ordinance, in our code, I told you it has changed a bit over the years as we've tried to continually tweak it to match what we needed to do. We've built in a lot of these little carve-outs. So we started with a family is a group of people related by blood or marriage, but we excluded certain people that were remotely related. I think we excluded first cousins and more remote kinds of relatedness. Other carve-outs that we built in over time, and I can't tell you exactly why and when these came into the code, but we added a carve-out for having two married couples living together. That was considered not a family under our code. We had another exception that we put in there where we had to say that nannies and household help would be considered part of the family if they live on the premises. I have to refer to my notes here, I apologize. We had excluded two or more married couples. We had also excluded two or more parents who were not married to each other and not themselves parent and child. And then the one I mentioned, which was any group of persons related to the sole relationship or as first cousins or any more distant degrees of consanguinity. All of these are trying to tell people who is and who isn't their family. And so we want to move away from that, following the same reasoning that the Toledo court talked about. And instead, what I've written is a system where a family is one of two things. A family is either a traditional family, meaning a group of people related by blood or marriage. And it stops there. I've not worded this to get into what relationships are okay. If they're related by blood or marriage, they're a family. It's up to them to decide who makes up their family. So that's one kind of family. The other is a household that's a household that is the functional equivalent of a traditional family. And that is intended to capture the other groupings that may not be related by blood or marriage, but do in fact function and live together as a household and should be treated as a family for zoning purposes. And so that leads you to this section 409 that would be added to the zoning code, which talks about how we're going to address these households that are the functional equivalent of a traditional family. I've set up this section to apply to residential group rentals, which is any time that a home is being rented to groups of people. And residential group rentals are the circumstance where this determination would come into play, whether a group is a family or the functional equivalent of a family. But the way this works is this. If either on the city's investigation or a complaint from a resident or really in any manner that it comes to the city's attention that there's a house and we need to make a determination whether the people there constitute a family or not, the building commissioner is authorized to make a written determination of that, and this ordinance spells out the decision process that's to be followed in doing that. And we've spelled out a number of factors to be taken into consideration. This is, and I should tell you, this is based very strongly on the Toledo ordinance that has passed muster up there. But what we said is there are certain things that if the group of people meets these, this is prima facie evidence that they are operating as a family, even though they're not necessarily related by blood or marriage. And then we've spelled out a list of things that if these factors are present, this is prima facie evidence that they are not the functional equivalent of a traditional family. And then there's a third list of factors that's basically used to rebut those first two prima facie presumptions that the group is or is not a family. And those additional factors are the ones that I think are so key, because one of the difficulties that we have in enforcing this, and you all know this, over the years we've certainly had a number of matters before council that would involve housing arrangements down around the University of Dayton, for example. And that's just one area. I'm kind of picking on that, but that's an area of town where this part of our ordinance comes into play a lot, because we have a lot of college rental situations down there. a lot of groups of students that want to rent a house together. And what we've always said in the past under our code is any more than 2 unrelated persons can't be there. And people are constantly trying to find ways around that, find ways to rent to more than 2, pack them in there. What we've found is that it's very difficult to prove who actually lives in a particular property. When you talk about proof to the level that would persuade a court, how do you prove that? And especially with college kids, where someone may be crashing on someone else's couch for a couple of weeks, friends stay over, things like that. It becomes a very difficult exercise to prove who actually lives there. And of course, landlords and tenants are not always real happy to provide copies of their leases and things like that. And we've even found that leases are not always the best guidance on that. What this ordinance tries to do is spell out a number of objective criteria that can be used to determine who lives there and whether that group living there operates as a family or doesn't. And I want to just kind of run through a few of these so that council understands what they are. The factors that are prima facie evidence that the group living together does constitute a family are, one is that the same group of persons or a majority of them have resided together at a different location for at least 6 months or at the present location for at least 12 months. So have they been living together for a while? That's one factor. The other one is 1 or 2 members of the group have executed the lease for the entire premises, including the entire rental obligation, and there are no sublease, hold harmless, or other written arrangements to prorate the rent or recover the rent from other members of the group. In a typical family, you're going to have one person that signs the lease for the whole family and they all move in. What we've found with a lot of these college rentals is that each student is individually signed up on a lease, and so this provision is designed to get at that. Then we talk about the factors that are prima facie evidence that the group does not constitute a family. One of those is the group includes more than 2 unrelated persons. So we've kept the no more than 2 unrelated persons in our code, and that's important for anyone who's at home that might be watching this tonight. I don't want anyone to think that we're relaxing or loosening or we're going to start allowing behavior that we've tried to prohibit in the past. That's not the case. We have retained that in there. Our goal in doing this is to make sure that our ordinance is as defensible as it can be and that it functions in the way that we need it to for our community. So those factors that are prima facie evidence that they do not constitute a family, more than 2 unrelated individuals, individual members of the group have entered into separate leases for the same premises or parts thereof, and the third is that the premises are equipped with combination or key-operated locks on individual rooms so that people can exclude other people in the home from their room. It's a common thing we see on homes that are used as student rentals, probably not so common in most of your family homes. So then we get to the third part, which are the additional factors to be considered that can rebut either one of those 2 presumptions. We can consider the voter registration. And I will point out voter registration and a number of the other things. These are things that we can objectively ascertain. We can pull voter records and look at them. We can look at driver's licenses, which I'll mention in a minute. These are things we can do without having to get a search warrant or storm in or otherwise conduct long, exhaustive discovery with someone in an enforcement situation. These are objective. We can determine these things or learn these things and then make a determination about that group without having to be invasive. Voter registration is one. Are a majority of the people that live there registered to vote using that address as their registered address? Driver's licenses. Do a majority of those who are driver eligible, age-wise, do a majority of them have driver's licenses that show that property as their address? Motor vehicle registration, same kind of thing. Does it come back to that address? Tax filings. Are the filing of tax returns by a majority of the members of the group, do they file listing that address as their principal place of residence? Or do they file somewhere else? If they're filing somewhere else, that would tend to be evidence negating the idea that they're the functional equivalent of a family living together here. Minor children. The regular presence of minor children at the home tends to be an indicator that they are functioning as a family. If there are no minor children, that tends to be an indicator that they're not. Bear in mind, these are not absolutes. These are factors to be considered in light of those other presumptions. Summer living arrangements. During the summertime, do the people continue living in this home, or do they go elsewhere? And if they go elsewhere, do they all go to one place, or do they go to multiple addresses? factors to consider in determining whether they are or are not the functional equivalent of a family. Household furniture and appliances. Do they buy things as a group, or do they all come with their own separate furniture and appliances and kind of have their own, they know whose is whose? Employment. Full-time employment of some members of the group in the general community is considered evidence in support of the proposition that the group is a family. And then the last one on the list are groceries and meal preparation. Are they shopping for groceries together? Do they prepare and take their meals together? Or is it more of a loose collection of people that kind of come and go as they please and, dine here and there and whatever? Throughout all of this, the goal is to come up with clear, objective criteria that can be used to weigh these situations so that we can make a determination whether they constitute a family or not. And if they don't, then we can proceed with zoning enforcement to deal with that situation. The last thing I will point out is that we did retain, and it's built in here, we did retain the provision that I mentioned before that was inserted to comply with federal fair housing laws, and that is that supported living facilities or similar facilities that provide accommodations for up to 4 unrelated adults who have various disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's still going to be permitted no matter what. And we certainly wouldn't try to eliminate that, nor could we if we wanted to. So I really just wanted to give you kind of an introduction or an explanation of what this ordinance is, what it does, and why it's in front of you. If you have questions for me at this time, I'd be happy to take them.
Questions for our law director? So you're trying to clean up definitions to become more clear, and you're trying to add some objective criteria that we can use in the event that we have a situation where we feel that someone is not operating as a family unit. Is
You
that?
just took my whole presentation and condensed it to about 10
That's
seconds.
why I'm the mayor.
That's it.
Okay, but I appreciate that. Appreciate that compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
You're correct. That is what this does.
All right. And so I think that concludes your report. So now, if there's anyone else that wishes to address council regarding this issue, this would be the time for you to come down in our public hearing and either in favor or opposed to this ordinance. Does anyone else wish to address council? Please come down and state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Martha Haley from Irving Avenue.
Could you
Could
put the mic a little bit closer to you? Thank you.
My only question in all of this, I don't see how this makes enforcement any easier. Because we have turned in before license plate numbers of 3 or 4 cars parked in back of a house, and nothing has happened before. So that would be the concern I would have as this is written. And that's all I want to say.
All right, thank you. And I believe that by adding some of this criteria, we didn't have those kinds of criteria in our current ordinance, is my understanding, which sometimes makes it harder to come up with a definite ruling that this person is operating in a family unit or not. Is that an accurate statement or not?
Yes. The way the code exists now, we've got a definition of family that appears in that definition section, and it talks about who's allowed to be there, and that's fine. When we go to enforce that, we have to then prove who's living there in violation of what that definition says, and that's where we've run into difficulties. That it's to try to prove who's living somewhere, who's on the lease, who's occupying it regularly. Unless you've got somebody who can literally sit there over the course of the year lease and say, I saw this person come in and go out on these dates and times, and here's when they were there, and here's when their car was there, and we believe they're living there. And I certainly understand your concerns. I know you see this all the time down there in your neighborhood. It's taking your observations and turning that into proof that is admissible in court and persuasive to a judge, and that's very difficult under our current ordinance. I'm actually trying to change this to help the situation that you're dealing with down there. And what I've developed to go along with this ordinance is a form that the building commissioner will use. It's like a flow chart running, and I talked there about the prima facie evidence in favor of the proposition that they're a family, prima facie evidence against it, and then all these factors that you use to weigh and determine those. That's all been boiled down into a flow chart kind of form that the building commissioner can go through and fill out. And at the end of that, you make it steers you to a conclusion. Either this group is a family or they are not the functional equivalent of family. If they're not, that determination becomes the basis for enforcement action in court. And we believe that that would be both defensible and supportable in front of a judge. That's the whole reason we're doing this, is so that when we need to enforce these, we have the ammunition we need to take it into court and to prevail.
And while we've had these issues primarily in our northern part of Oakwood, it's not exclusive to that. We've had to
Absolutely
deal with
not.
this issue on the west side and the east side, south of town as well, so.
Anytime you have group rentals of residential property, there's a potential for this to happen. And certainly, I don't mean to just come down on college students. They need to find a place to live too. But what we're trying to recognize and always have through our code is that single or two-family residential neighborhoods are not the place for, I guess, what I would call frat housing or that kind of collective living. We don't believe that it's compatible in those neighborhoods.
And we, continue to have ongoing dialogue with the University of Dayton and their housing people, and that's something that this council is well aware of and stands united in making sure that UD becomes or stays a good neighbor with us, is probably a better way of saying it. Anyone else wish to address council on this matter? All right, at that point, I will then close the public hearing. We will deliberate on this matter, and at our next meeting in July is when you'll bring it up for a second reading. Is
That's
that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Byington. You are not off the hook because you now have yet another ordinance you want to introduce.
Something fun for a change. This is an ordinance to establish procedures and standards for the operation of mobile food vehicles, food trucks. Two ordinances are being introduced tonight to update our business regulation code. The first is an ordinance that will allow mobile food vehicles, or food trucks, to operate on public right-of-ways in the city. Most of us are probably very familiar with food trucks, which have been gaining popularity in recent years. We've been wary about permitting them in Oakwood due to the possible negative impact of on our residential neighborhoods, but it's clear that food trucks are a phenomenon that is here to stay for the foreseeable future. This ordinance will allow food truck operation in the city, but include a number of provisions designed to protect the residential character of our community. Some of the highlights include the following. All operators must be licensed by the city. All operators and facilities must be in full compliance with all state and county regulations for mobile food service and must have all necessary licenses, permits, certificates, and inspections. All operators and facilities must be in full compliance with all local ordinances, including the noise ordinances. All operators will be required to display a decal on the vehicle indicating current licensure. Food trucks will be prohibited in alleys and will be prohibited on the following streets: Far Hills Avenue, Schroyer Road, Patterson Road, East and West Shantz Avenue between Oakwood Avenue and Oakwood Kettering Corporate Line, Oakwood Avenue between Far Hills and Irving Avenues, and Park Avenue between Far Hills and Harmon Avenue. The hours of operations will be between 11 a.m. and 9 p.m., and a food truck may only sell food in one location for 1 hour. However, the city manager will have the authority to approve extended times or hours in connection with a special event. And food trucks must be parked by the curb, must dispense food curbside, and cannot impede the orderly flow of traffic. This is a first reading of this ordinance, so I'm not going to make a motion at this time. We will address it again at our July meeting.
All right, thank you. And I believe you have another ordinance as well.
Yes, this is an ordinance to amend existing section 72501, street sales prohibited except in the business district, or the Oakwood Business Regulation Code, to create an exemption for the operation of licensed mobile food vehicles. This is the second ordinance to update our business regulation code as it pertains to food trucks. This is an existing ordinance in our code, section 725-1, 25-01 that prohibits anyone from offering anything or product for sale within any street right-of-way. The ordinance I am introducing now would amend that section to create an exemption for food trucks. And this is also a first reading of this ordinance, so I'll make no motion at this time.
Thank you. I just have a off-the-wall question. In the good old days when the ice cream truck used to come up and down the streets in Kettering and all the little children chased it for 2 or 3 blocks, is that going to be covered by this ordinance?
As it stands, our code prohibits those kinds of vehicles. That is section 7. I'm not on there, am I? This section 725.01 that's in our code now prohibits those already. Whether that would then be permitted under this new ordinance, I guess the answer is yes, as long as they're licensed and they meet all the criteria. And I guess it would be problematic that, I think, don't the ice cream trucks usually stop in the middle of the road? It was the kids are
Yeah.
running, chasing, and
Well,
they
that's
stop.
the way we used to do it in the good old days.
I think in this case, they'll at least have to pull over to the curb and dispense food curbside rather than having all the kids come out and meet them in the street. But they could become licensed
All
as
right.
long as they meet all the other requirements.
I don't even know if those exist anymore. Have you seen one lately?
I haven't seen one lately.
I've
I
not seen one
haven't shopped
lately.
at one recently. No, thank you.
I saw one yesterday in Kettering, so I know
Did
they
you?
still
All right.
exist.
Well, I don't want
But they will
anyone,
meet the noise ordinance, so.
yes. I don't want anybody competing with graders. I want everybody
Okay.
to buy graders
That's
ice
right.
cream here, so, all right. You finally, Vice Mayor Byington, have a resolution regarding our property tax issue.
Yes, Your Honor. This is a resolution by the Council of the City of Oakwood declaring the necessity of a renewal levy in excess of the 10 mil limitation and requesting the county auditor to certify the total current tax valuation of the City of Oakwood and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by a specific number of mills. When the state of Ohio eliminated the estate tax and made other cuts to local government funding, the City of Oakwood lost almost $3 million in annual revenue. Council and staff embarked on an intensive campaign of neighborhood and town hall meetings to discuss options with our residents, and we decided on a combination of approaches to address the significant shortfall. One of these was a 3.75 mil property tax levy that was approved by Oakwood voters in 2013 and is due to expire at the end of 2018. This resolution is the first legislative step towards placing a renewal of this 3.75 mil levy on the ballot in November. The second piece of legislation will be on our agenda for the council meeting in July. It is important to note that since this is a renewal instead of a new tax levy, it will maintain the current levels of property taxation and will not increase property taxes. I move that council adopt this resolution this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any comments or discussions for Vice Mayor Byington? We're excited to know that, our treasurer, Carolyn Rice, will collect 99% of our renewal levy, which is no new taxes, so thank you
That's
for your
correct.
support. Any other comments? Hearing none, Lori, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Duncan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Byington?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mrs. Hilton?
Yes.
Mr. Epley?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes our legislation. We have a staff report tonight from our Director of Leisure Services, Carol Collins. Welcome, Carol.
Well, good evening, Mayor Duncan and Vice Mayor Byington and Oakwood City Council members. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I was just wanting to share some activities and some information about the Department of Leisure Services and horticulture, things that I think that you'll find very interesting. Gardner Pool opened on Memorial Day weekend. So far, to date, we have 419 family memberships, 117 single memberships, and 89 senior memberships. It's a little bit more than what we had in years past, but we still continue to have memberships come in day after day. Summer fun at the pool. We have 3 scheduled family nights planned. Sunday, June the 24th, Sunday, July the 22nd, and Sunday, August the 12th. The pool staff will have organized activities and relay races for the families to enjoy. It's always a fun night for the families to come and be together. We look forward to having them at the pool. Today was the first day of the Dolphin swim team. There were 210 swimmers that registered as compared to 160 last year. They have dominated their league for the last 15-plus years, and it's amazing that a lot of the coaches that we have swam when they were 6 years old and are now the swim team coaches. Registration was last night, and they began bright and early this morning.
That wasn't a picture of them all in the pool, was it?
Right, it was. Swim lessons, registration today took place for the registration for swim lessons. Last year we had 240 participants, and we're sure that after registration today that we'll come close to that number. Another activity that we plan on having is the family movie night at Old River Sports Complex. That will be on Friday, June the 22nd, and it's Beauty and the Beast, and it's a sing-along this year. It's being co-sponsored by my department as well as Wright Memorial Public Library. We always look forward to working with them year after year on movie night.
That has you written all over it.
And as summer programs begin, this is the first week for all of the camps. So we have a number of camps that the kids can participate in. And so far, so good. We've had lots of participants register for all of these programs. Our sports programs are popular, but so are the summer camps in the parks. So tennis lessons this year will be held at Orchardly Park because of the construction at Schaefer Park. And Hollinger Tennis Center. I thought I would bring you up to date on the membership. The OCC is responsible for collecting all of the monetary donations and memberships. To date, we have 57 renewals, and we have 2 new members and 5 mid-season memberships. And we continue to get memberships in on a daily basis, and I think that the Hollinger board is very pleased with what they've gotten so far this year. Tree City, USA. For the 37th consecutive year, Ohio was recognized as the nation's leader in Tree City, USA. There were 243 participating cities, villages, and townships. Last year, 29,000 trees were planted, 85,000 trees were pruned, volunteer hours more than 50,000, and the forestry programs that the money went towards the urban forestry efforts put on by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources was over $40 million. Oakwood was recognized for 36 years as a Tree City USA, and that was held in Miamisburg this year, and City Manager Klopsch attended.
And Mrs. Hilton.
So one of the projects that we just completed was the replacement of the driveway at Smith Gardens. And I think that you'll see that it was a very nice improvement for the gardens as well as the community. This Sunday is the first blanket concert at Smith Gardens, and it will be Madcap Puppets, Rumpelstiltskin, a puppet musical. The other 2 are July the 15th with the Fries Band, and Sunday, August the 5th with the Band 5. If it rains that day, it will be held at the Oakwood Community Center in the Great Room. I would like to recognize the Oakwood Environmental Committee for all of the efforts that they put into planting the boulevard between Aberdeen and Telford. These 5 people planted over 1,600 trees or plants in less than an hour and a half. So this is what it looked like when it was finished. And the Environmental Committee is, I think, a very worthwhile committee for the community. Another addition was at Cook Park. This year, the Moms Group donated $250 towards the planting of perennials at Cook Park. That took place in the middle of May, and the Moms Group were the ones that planted the plant material. And so far, so good. You know, it looks great down there, and we're very happy to have this park. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was the Volusia boxes. Brian Caldwell, the horticulturist, did all of the building of the new boxes at Volusia and Oakwood Avenue, and he did a great job, and I appreciate all of his efforts in putting it together. But I do think if you haven't gone by, you really should, because it's really a nice addition to the community. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
That's all, folks? Is that what that was? Okay. Well, Carol, congratulations again on your department. You outdo yourself every year with your reports. Does anyone have questions for Carol?
I don't think so. Great job.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. That concludes our staff report, so we now have a city manager report.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I want to thank Carol also. I always forget the number of years, but 43? 44 years in August. She will have been with Oakwood City staff. I mean, hard to believe, and continues to do just a fabulous job year in and year out. The ambiance of Oakwood, particularly this time of year, is incredible, and that's in almost singularly through the efforts of Carol and her excellent staff. And you saw that driveway at Smith Gardens. Brian Caldwell, who's our horticulturist, but he's a jack of many trades and has multiple skills and talents. And I didn't know a couple years ago that he was a bricklayer or a paver layer, but he is. He does an awful lot of jobs around our community with help from other staff, and saves us a bunch of outside labor costs in doing so. So he did a fabulous job there for Brian. The pool continues to be just a wonderful community resource for a small city like Oakwood to have a public pool like this. And Karen Early does an outstanding job every spring preparing that swimming pool for the season, then hiring all the staff, and then overseeing the operation of the pool, and then the proper closure of it in the fall, and planning capital improvement stuff that might be needed. And then Old River Field, Thomas Hayes, Carol's other key person, does just a great job of keeping that facility looking great. And I don't know what the numbers are up to now with Oakwood United Soccer, but it's huge. I want to say over 400 maybe, something like that, but don't quote me on that. But they have several hundred members, most of which are Oakwood residents of all ages, and the Old River Fields are their primary place to play, and Thomas does a great job of overseeing that. Quick update on some projects. Carol mentioned the tennis courts briefly. If you drive by anywhere near Schaefer Park or the OCC, you see the major construction underway, and we're now in our third or fourth week of that project, and things are moving along quickly. Our goal is to have that project done by the end of July, or at the latest early August, in time for the high school tennis team to use the facility. And as you know, it will be the home of Oakwood High School tennis in the fall and in the spring, and also a 5-court facility open to the general public. And I think it will be a wonderful new addition for our community. Vectren has started work on their 2018 gas line replacement project, and up and down Peach Orchard Avenue, you'll see an awful lot of construction activity, and it's now also starting on East Drive. The work on East Drive I've commented on before. That'll be a significant trench, a 16-inch diameter main gas pipe, distribution pipe will be put in there, replacing an old line that is at the end of its useful life. So that'll be on East Drive, about a 3-month project, a bit shorter on Peach Orchard, but all the residents on East Drive have received details on that project. Our annual repaving project is set to begin on or about Monday, July 9th. So we're getting, just about a month out from that. And the John R. Jurgensen Company has the contract this year, about $210,000 worth of repaving. And that, depending on weather, will be a 1 to 2 week project. And the streets that we're repaving have been in the Oakwood City newsletter, and all the residents on those streets have already received a letter from the city about that. And then our sidewalk program, annual concrete work, will start here in a couple weeks, and most of the work will take place in the southeastern quadrant of Oakwood, East Drive, Far Hills, Aberdeen, Schroyer, the area bounded by those 4 streets. And I'll end my comments tonight by just recognizing the retirement of my dear friend Dave Hicks from the city of Moraine. The mayor and I attended a wonderful retirement luncheon for Dave about 4 or 5 weeks ago. His replacement started today, Brian Chudkowski, who I got to know years ago when he was the city manager of Riverside. And he left Riverside, went to Connecticut, and now he's back to the Miami Valley, and he'll be taking over at the city of Moraine. But Dave served Moraine for over 40 years, was originally hired as a police officer, and worked his way up through detective, ultimately to be the chief of police, and then almost about the time when I was appointed manager 16 years ago, right about the same time, Dave became manager of Moraine. So he's basically served that community for over 40 years, much like Carol has served here in Oakwood. So true friend, class act, and just a real good man, and I wish him the best in retirement.
Very good. Any questions for our city manager? Hearing none, then we will go to council comments. Councilmember Epley.
Thank you, Your Honor, but I have no comments tonight.
All righty. Councilmember Hilton.
Yes, Your Honor, I just wanted to congratulate Carol Collins on all her great work. I mean, she just continues to do it. In particular, the Smith Gardens, this has become a place where middle-aged women walk on our mornings. So I have a couple of friends, of whom one was with me when we ran into Brian, and he talked about the whole replacement project and all the things, and she was so impressed. I mean, she's like, that guy, he knows so much. She was like, so anyway, it just looks great. So we go down there twice a week. I mean, a couple of my friends. So anyway, it looks great. It's a great community asset.
Councilmember Stevens.
Just real quick, I'd like to also welcome our 2 newest public safety officers. From the comments that Chief Hill mentioned about how successful they've been already, and looking at them, they're both so young. I can only hope for a wonderful long career out of both of them. And we've had a lot of turnover in the last, I'll call it 10 years, due to retirement. Well deserved, and it brings in a lot of young guys. And I'm not trying to compare the newest guy to the guy that came in 5 times ago, but they all seem to be good, and they all seem to be better, and I'm very impressed with that. And I just hope that our citizens realize that we're only bringing in the best guys, and it's something that I'm very proud of, being an Oakwood citizen, that we have good officers. We hear the stories all the time, and I'm not going to reiterate that, but they're just, and you see them, I see them in the community, I talk to them all the time, and they're very polished individuals, and they do a very professional job. So I'd like to welcome them and wish them a long, wonderful career here at Oakwood.
Vice Mayor Byington.
Yes, Your Honor, I just had 2 comments. One, this last weekend was the start of the Oakwood Farmers Market, and it was very successful. At least when I was there, it was pretty well packed. So I encourage everybody to get out and check it out if they get a chance. A lot of very interesting vendors, things that you see at a farmer's market, and sometimes things you might see at a craft show and those type of things. So get out there if you get a chance. The second one was I wanted to share a story that I read online today that just made me think about how thankful I am for the community that I live in. This was Dateline today. It said, an Oakwood team competing in the Destination Imagination Globals in Knoxville, Tennessee over the weekend had a chance to meet a buddy team from Pakistan. What transpired was a lesson in sportsmanship and goodwill. The DI program is based on students working in teams to solve challenges. Team members choose a central team challenge to solve, designed to be a long-term effort. These team challenges often fall into the same interest categories: science, technical engineering, service learning, fine arts, improvisation, etc. each year, but the actual details of the challenges change. Frequently, students are encouraged to incorporate technical engineering and artistic methods to enhance their solution. At the competition, a team of young boys from Pakistan had a glitch in their technology, and they spent almost all of their allotted 8 minutes for their presentation trying to actually fix it. Then they were stopped at that time limit and essentially unable to present their solution. Needless to say, they were crushed. The Oakwood team, manager and team who were there to support their buddy team, came to the rescue by taking all of their props and setting them up in a nearby hallway space and gathering an audience to watch them try again. The Pakistan team performed their whole skit for a large supportive crowd. Lots of tears were turned to smiles when they were able to share their hard work with people after traveling so far. Members of the Oakwood DI team, the Spotlight Six, had a top 10 finish at the competition. The fifth grade team from Harmon School placed 6th overall in the international competition in the elementary level fine arts category. They also achieved the highest score in the Central Challenge, although this category is not recognized on its own. Members of the team are Henry Almoni, Claire Savot, Deidre Lynch, Charlotte Powell, William Yuschak, and Ben Whitmer. Team's manager are Mackenzie Whitmer and Jennifer Almoni. After the competition, the Pakistani students that the Oakwood team had assisted at the competition and their families came to Oakwood for a visit, touring Harmon School, playing on the playground, and visiting Hawthorne Hill before they headed off to Niagara Falls. Let's see. I think that was basically about it. After reading that story, I thought to myself, Oakwood is always, premier at competition, and we take all of these things very seriously, but they also realize that, people are human. Sometimes technology, who among us hasn't had one of those glitches that ruin your entire presentation? And as a 5th grader, that can be devastating. So I just thought it was great that they banded together and did that for their fellow students. So made me proud to be in Oakwood.
That is a good story. I wanted to, on behalf of council, if you can give the kudos to our public safety department regarding the recent bank robbery that we had here at the LCNB branch. The perpetrator was captured within 24 hours. And I know our detective did a lot of work, late in the night, early into the morning, in order to be able to track the whereabouts of that person. I think they're both sitting downtown in the jail. And then I also want to give kudos not only to the professionals at the Oakwood City School District, but also the Oakwood Public Safety Department. When we had an incident of a student that was inducing panic last week, and the way that was handled was truly a situation that was grace and class, and the fact that there was this cooperation between our two different operations, that you all deserve kudos for that. So thank you for that. I will be representing the city here later this month as we have a change of command ceremony out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Colonel Bradley McDonald is going to be retiring, and he will be replaced by another colonel. I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but Colonel McDonald is affectionately known as the mayor of Wright-Patterson. So many other cities will be sending representatives for that change of command ceremony, and it will be at the National Air and Space Museum. So that's always a nice place to have a ceremony. So with that, our next meeting is going to be on Monday, July 16, and this meeting is adjourned.